The moment life begins, something extraordinary starts happening inside the human body, something so complex, so perfectly timed, and so unbelievably intelligent that even modern science still calls it a miracle. From a single microscopic cell, a complete human being forms, grows, and prepares for the moment it will enter the world. But what makes this possible isn't just the baby itself. There is another organ built only for pregnancy, designed only to protect life, and destroyed after birth as if its only purpose was to help that one child survive. That organ is the placenta. And today, we're going to follow one of the most incredible journeys in human biology, the development of the placenta, the final months of pregnancy, and the powerful moment of labor and delivery. By the end of this story, you will understand why birth is not just a medical process. It's one of the most amazing events nature has ever created. Right after fertilization, when the sperm and egg combine, the body begins preparing for something it has never done before. The fertilized egg starts dividing rapidly, moving down the fallopian tube toward the uterus. At this stage, the embryo is just a tiny cluster of cells, smaller than a grain of sand, but already the instructions for an entire human life are written inside it. Within a few days, this cluster becomes what scientists call a blastocyst, and this is the moment when the first step toward forming the placenta begins. When the blastocyst reaches the uterus, it doesn't just float around. It must attach itself to the uterine wall, a process called implantation. This is one of the most critical moments in pregnancy. If implantation fails, the pregnancy cannot continue. But if it succeeds, something incredible starts happening. The outer cells of the embryo begin to grow into the lining of the uterus, not to harm the mother, but to connect with her blood supply. These cells will eventually form the placenta, the lifeline between mother and baby. The placenta is not part of the mother's body, and it is not part of the baby's body alone. It is a shared organ, built from both, working as a bridge between two lives. Inside the uterine wall, tiny finger-like structures called villi begin to grow. These villi reach into the mother's blood vessels, allowing oxygen and nutrients to pass to the baby while waste products move back to the mother to be removed. This exchange happens without the mother's blood and the baby's blood mixing directly, which protects both of them. As the weeks pass, the placenta grows larger and more complex. By the end of the first trimester, it has become a fully functioning organ. It produces hormones that keep the pregnancy going, including progesterone and estrogen. These hormones tell the mother's body not to release another egg, not to shed the uterine lining, and to continue supporting the baby's growth. Without the placenta producing these hormones, the pregnancy would end. At the same time, the umbilical cord begins to form. This cord connects the baby to the placenta, carrying oxygen, nutrients, and antibodies from the mother, and carrying carbon dioxide and waste away from the baby. Inside the umbilical cord are 3 blood vessels, 2 arteries, and 1 vein, protected by a soft, jelly-like substance that keeps them from being squeezed shut as the baby moves. By the second trimester, the placenta becomes even more powerful. It acts like the baby's lungs, kidneys, liver, and digestive system all at once. The baby does not breathe air yet, but oxygen from the mother's blood passes through the placenta. The baby does not eat food yet, but nutrients from the mother's diet travel through the placenta. The baby's immune system is still developing, but antibodies from the mother cross the placenta to help protect the baby after birth. This is why the health of the mother during pregnancy is so important. Everything she eats, drinks, breathes, or feels can affect the baby through the placenta. The placenta filters many harmful substances, but not all of them. Alcohol, nicotine, and certain drugs can pass through, reaching the baby's bloodstream. That's why doctors always say pregnancy care is not only about the mother, but about the tiny life connected to her. As the baby grows bigger, the placenta grows too, adjusting its blood flow to meet the baby's needs. By the third trimester, the baby is developing rapidly. The brain is forming millions of connections, the lungs are preparing to breathe, and the body is storing fat to stay warm after birth. During this time, the placenta is working harder than ever, delivering oxygen every second, every minute, every hour. But pregnancy cannot last forever. At some point, the body begins preparing for labor. This preparation starts weeks before the actual birth. Hormones begin to change again. The level of progesterone slowly decreases, while another hormone called oxytocin becomes more important. Oxytocin is often called the love hormone, but it is also the hormone that causes the uterus to contract. Inside the uterus, the baby moves lower, getting into position for birth. The cervix, which has been tightly closed for months, begins to soften and thin out. This process is called effacement. Slowly, the cervix also starts to open, which is called dilation. These changes may take days or even weeks before labor truly begins. Then comes the moment when real labor starts. Contractions begin, at first mild and irregular, then stronger and closer together. Each contraction tightens the muscles of the uterus, pushing the baby downward. This is not random. The body is following a precise biological program that has existed for millions of years. During labor, the placenta is still working, still sending oxygen to the baby between contractions. This is why the timing of contractions is important. The uterus tightens, then relaxes, allowing blood to flow again. The baby depends on this rhythm to stay safe until birth. As labor continues, the cervix opens wider and wider until it reaches about 10 centimeters. This is the point when the baby can pass through the birth canal. The mother's body releases even more oxytocin, making contractions stronger. Endorphins, the body's natural painkillers, are also released to help her cope with the intensity of labor. Finally, the pushing stage begins. With each contraction, the mother pushes and the baby moves closer to the outside world. The head usually comes first because it is the largest part of the baby's body. The bones of the baby's skull are not fully fused yet, which allows them to overlap slightly so the head can fit through the birth canal. Then, in one powerful moment, the baby is born. After months of growth, protected by the placenta, connected by the umbilical cord, the baby takes its first breath. The lungs expand for the first time, and the circulatory system changes instantly. Blood no longer needs to go through the placenta for oxygen, because the baby can now breathe on its own. But the birth is not completely finished yet. The placenta, which has supported the baby for 9 months, still remains inside the uterus. After the baby is born, the uterus continues to contract, and these contractions help separate the placenta from the uterine wall. This stage is called the delivery of the placenta. Within a few minutes, the placenta is pushed out of the body. Once it is delivered, its job is done. This organ, which formed only for pregnancy, is no longer needed. The umbilical cord is cut, and the connection between mother and baby changes forever. The baby is now independent, breathing, feeding, and living outside the womb. What makes this entire process so amazing is that it happens naturally, guided by hormones, cells, and signals that work together perfectly most of the time. The placenta grows at the right speed, the baby develops in the right order, the body prepares for labor at the right moment, and birth happens when the baby is ready to survive outside. Scientists have studied pregnancy for decades, yet the development of the placenta is still one of the most fascinating mysteries in biology. No machine humans have built can fully replace what the placenta does. It feeds, protects, cleans, and supports life every second without stopping. Even after birth, the effects of the placenta continue. The antibodies the baby receives from the mother help protect it from infections. The nutrients stored during pregnancy help the baby grow. The hormones released during labor help the mother bond with her child. This is why birth is often called a miracle, not because it is magic, but because it is a perfectly designed biological process that turns one cell into a living human being. From implantation to placenta formation, from the first heartbeat to the first breath, from the first contraction to the final delivery, every step is part of a journey that shows how powerful the human body truly is. And when you understand what happens behind the scenes, you realize that every birth is not just the start of a life. It is the result of millions of tiny events working together in perfect timing, proving that the creation of life is one of the greatest wonders we will ever witness. And as we continue this journey of how life grows and survives inside the womb, there is another incredible challenge the body must solve, something most people never even think about. The baby developing inside the uterus carries genetic material from both the mother and the father. This means the baby is not completely identical to the mother's body. In fact, from the perspective of the immune system, the baby could be seen as something foreign. Normally, when the immune system detects anything foreign, whether it is a virus, bacteria, or transplanted tissue, it tries to attack and destroy it to protect the body. But during pregnancy, this does not happen. Instead, the mother's body allows the baby to grow safely for 9 months without being rejected. The reason this is possible is because the placenta acts as a powerful biological shield, carefully controlling how the mother's immune system reacts. To understand how amazing this is, you have to remember what the immune system is designed to do. Every day, the immune system scans the body looking for anything that does not belong. Cells carry special markers on their surface that tell the immune system they are part of the body. If those markers look different, the immune system becomes alert and prepares to attack. Since the baby has half of its genes from the father, many of its cells carry markers that are not exactly the same as the mother's. Under normal conditions, this difference could trigger an immune response. But during pregnancy, the placenta creates a unique environment that tells the immune system to stay calm. As soon as implantation happens, the outer cells that will form the placenta begin interacting with the mother's immune cells in the lining of the uterus. Instead of causing inflammation, which is the usual reaction to something foreign, these placental cells send signals that make the immune system more tolerant. Scientists sometimes describe this as the immune system being reprogrammed locally, only in the uterus, so that the baby can grow without danger while the rest of the body still stays protected against infections. One of the ways the placenta does this is by forming a physical barrier between the mother's blood and the baby's blood. Even though nutrients and oxygen pass through, most immune cells do not cross easily. The placenta is built with layers of specialized cells that act like a filter. These layers allow useful substances to pass, but block many of the immune cells that could attack the baby's tissues. This separation is very important because it prevents direct contact between the mother's immune defenses and the baby's developing organs. But the placenta does more than just act as a wall. It also produces chemical signals that actively control the immune response. Certain proteins released by the placenta tell the mother's immune cells not to become aggressive in the uterus. These signals reduce inflammation and encourage a type of immune reaction that is more protective than destructive. Instead of attacking, the immune system becomes supportive, helping maintain a healthy pregnancy. Another fascinating part of this process involves special immune cells in the uterus called natural killer cells. Normally, natural killer cells destroy infected or abnormal cells very quickly. But during pregnancy, these cells behave differently. Under the influence of the placenta, they change their role. Instead of attacking, they help the placenta grow and help blood vessels develop so the baby can receive enough oxygen and nutrients. This is one of the rare situations in the human body where immune cells are not fighting, but actually helping another organism survive. The placenta also hides certain markers on the baby's cells that would normally trigger an immune reaction. These markers are part of what scientists call histocompatibility proteins, which are usually used by the immune system to recognize what belongs in the body. Placental cells display a special version of these proteins that does not activate the usual immune attack. This allows the baby to remain undetected as a threat, even though it carries genetic differences. Hormones produced during pregnancy also play an important role in protecting the baby. Progesterone, one of the main pregnancy hormones, not only supports the uterine lining but also affects the immune system. Higher levels of progesterone make immune reactions less aggressive, especially in the uterus. This helps prevent rejection of the baby while still allowing the body to defend itself against real infections. As the pregnancy continues, the placenta keeps adjusting how the immune system behaves. In the early stages, it focuses on preventing rejection so the embryo can implant successfully. In the middle months, it supports steady growth by keeping inflammation low and maintaining good blood flow. In the final months, it prepares both the mother and the baby for birth, while still keeping the immune balance stable. Even with all these protections, the system has to stay carefully controlled. If the immune response becomes too strong, it can lead to problems such as miscarriage or complications in pregnancy. If the immune response becomes too weak, the mother could become more vulnerable to infections. The placenta must keep everything in balance, protecting the baby without putting the mother at risk. This balance is one of the reasons pregnancy is such a complex biological process. Another amazing feature is that the placenta can also pass helpful immune protection from the mother to the baby. Certain antibodies cross through the placenta and enter the baby's bloodstream. These antibodies help protect the baby during the first months after birth, when the baby's own immune system is still developing. In this way, the placenta does not only prevent attack, it also prepares the baby to survive in the outside world. As the baby grows bigger, the placenta continues acting as both a shield and a bridge. It keeps harmful immune reactions away, while still allowing the exchange of oxygen, nutrients, and protective antibodies. Every second, thousands of tiny exchanges happen across the placental barrier, all carefully controlled so that both mother and baby stay safe. By the time the final weeks of pregnancy arrive, the placenta has been working nonstop for months, controlling hormones, managing the immune system, filtering substances, and supporting the baby's growth. Without this protection, the mother's body would treat the pregnancy very differently, and the baby would not be able to develop normally. Inside the uterus, the baby grows in a place that is both foreign and familiar at the same time, connected to the mother but still its own individual life. And the placenta makes this possible by acting as a guardian that keeps the peace between two bodies sharing the same space, allowing life to continue developing safely day after day, heartbeat after heartbeat, until the moment comes when the baby is strong enough to leave the protected world of the womb and face the outside world for the first time. And as the moment of birth finally arrives, another incredible transformation begins, one that happens within seconds, completely changing the way the baby's body works. For 9 months, the baby has lived in an environment where the lungs were not used for breathing, the digestive system was not used for eating, and the placenta handled the job of delivering oxygen and removing waste. Inside the womb, the baby's circulation system works in a very different way than it does after birth. Blood flows through special pathways that only exist during pregnancy, and these pathways allow the baby to survive without using the lungs. But the instant the umbilical cord is cut, the baby must switch from placental life to independent life, and the circulatory system has to change faster than at any other time in human life. Before birth, oxygen does not come from the air. It comes from the mother's blood through the placenta. Oxygen-rich blood travels from the placenta through the umbilical vein, moving directly toward the baby's heart. This blood is the baby's main supply of oxygen and nutrients, and the entire circulation system is designed around this connection. Because the baby is not breathing air, the lungs are filled with fluid and do not exchange oxygen yet. Sending large amounts of blood to the lungs would not be useful, so the fetal circulation has special shortcuts that allow blood to bypass the lungs and go straight to the rest of the body. One of these shortcuts is called the foramen ovale. This is a small opening between the right and left upper chambers of the heart. In adults, this opening is closed, but in the fetus it allows blood to flow directly from the right side of the heart to the left side, skipping the lungs. This means oxygen-rich blood coming from the placenta can quickly reach the brain and other important organs without being delayed. Another shortcut is called the ductus arteriosus. This is a small blood vessel that connects the pulmonary artery, which normally carries blood to the lungs, directly to the aorta, which carries blood to the rest of the body. Because of this connection, most of the blood that would normally go to the lungs is redirected into the main circulation. This system works perfectly while the baby is inside the uterus, where the placenta does the work of the lungs. There is also a third special pathway called the ductus venosus. This vessel allows some of the blood coming from the umbilical vein to bypass the liver and go straight toward the heart. In adults, blood from the digestive system must pass through the liver first, but the fetus does not need to process food yet, so this shortcut helps oxygen-rich blood reach the heart faster. All of these special pathways exist for one reason: to make sure the baby gets enough oxygen from the placenta while the lungs are still inactive. As long as the umbilical cord is attached, this system keeps working without any problem. The placenta continues to supply oxygen, the heart pumps blood through these fetal pathways, and the baby remains stable inside the womb. But everything changes the moment the baby is born. When the baby leaves the uterus, the connection to the placenta is no longer needed. For a short time after birth, the umbilical cord may still be attached, and blood can still flow between the baby and the placenta. This brief period allows the baby to adjust slowly instead of all at once. However, when the umbilical cord is clamped and cut, the baby loses its direct supply of oxygen from the mother. Now the lungs must take over immediately. The first breath is one of the most important events in the entire process of birth. When the baby inhales for the first time, the lungs expand, and the fluid inside the airways begins to clear. Air fills the tiny air sacs called alveoli, and oxygen starts entering the baby's blood directly from the air. This single action changes the pressure inside the chest and inside the blood vessels, and these pressure changes trigger the closure of the fetal circulation pathways. As the lungs fill with air, blood vessels inside the lungs open wider. This allows more blood to flow into the lungs to pick up oxygen. Because more blood is now going to the lungs, the amount of blood returning to the left side of the heart increases. This change in pressure pushes a small flap of tissue over the opening of the foramen ovale, closing it. Once this flap closes, blood can no longer pass directly from the right side of the heart to the left side. Instead, it must go to the lungs first, just like in an adult. At the same time, the ductus arteriosus begins to close. Before birth, this vessel stayed open because the baby's blood had low oxygen levels and certain hormones kept it relaxed. After the baby starts breathing, oxygen levels rise and the hormones change. These signals tell the ductus arteriosus to tighten and slowly seal shut. Over time, this vessel becomes a small ligament that no longer carries blood. The ductus venosus also closes after the umbilical cord is cut. Since blood is no longer coming from the placenta, there is no need for a shortcut past the liver. Blood from the digestive system will now pass through the liver the normal way once the baby begins feeding. This closure completes the change from fetal circulation to newborn circulation. All of these changes happen very quickly, often within minutes after birth. The baby's heart begins working in a completely new pattern. The lungs take over the job of oxygen exchange, and the placenta is no longer part of the system. This transition is so fast and so precise that most of the time we do not even notice how dramatic it really is. Another important part of this moment is the timing of cutting the umbilical cord. In many cases, doctors wait a short time before clamping the cord. This allows extra blood from the placenta to flow into the baby, giving the newborn more red blood cells and more oxygen. This extra blood can help the baby adjust more smoothly to life outside the womb. As the baby continues breathing, the circulatory system becomes more stable. The heart beats strongly, the lungs fill and empty with air, and oxygen moves through the bloodstream without help from the placenta. The baby's skin color changes from the bluish tone often seen right after birth to a healthy pink as oxygen levels rise. Even though these changes happen naturally, they require perfect coordination between the lungs, the heart, the blood vessels, and the brain. Signals must travel quickly, telling each part of the body what to do next. If any step happens too slowly or too quickly, the baby may need medical help to make the transition safely. This is why the first minutes after birth are watched so carefully by doctors and nurses. Inside the womb, the baby lived in a world where oxygen came from the mother, nutrients came from the placenta, and waste was carried away through the umbilical cord. Outside the womb, the baby must breathe, eat, and regulate its own body without that direct connection. The change in circulation is what makes this independence possible. The closing of the fetal pathways is one of the clearest signs that the baby has successfully entered a new stage of life. The heart now pumps blood through the lungs. The lungs provide oxygen to the blood, and the body begins working as a separate individual. The placenta, which once acted as the baby's lifeline, is no longer needed. Every newborn goes through this transformation, and it happens whether we see it or not. In just a few breaths, the body rewrites its entire circulation pattern, switching from a system designed for life inside the womb to one designed for life in the outside world. This change is one of the fastest and most remarkable adjustments the human body can make, a perfect example of how carefully the process of birth has been designed, allowing a tiny human who depended completely on the mother only moments before to begin living on its own, with a heart beating in a new rhythm, lungs filling with air for the first time, and blood flowing through a circulation system that will now support life for decades to come, all beginning in the exact moment when they umbilical cord is cut, and the baby's body takes its first true step into independent life.